Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Down by Contact. What we do here is we talk about the NFL, and this is the divisional round. Quite conceivably the best weekend of football that's going to exist in the entire season, postseason included, of course. I'm your host, Jeff Rich. You can follow me on Twitter at @byjeffrich, and I'm joined as always on Sunday night at 8:15 Eastern by my colleague in Northern California, Chris Green. You can follow him on Twitter at CGRN731. Chris, nice little weekend of watching football. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Sundays are always a busy day for me, but the payoff is that we get to watch some pretty exciting NFL action with some names. So, um, let's get right into it. These preliminary rounds before we get to the conference championships are always set up with two games on Saturday, two games on Sunday, and we started on Saturday with the Baltimore Ravens and Joe Cool or playoff Joe Flacco, the sixth seed going up to the number one seed, New England, taking on a Patriots team that, you know, they don't exactly wow you because they've just been doing it for so long. So the expectation is a championship every year, but they find new ways to host playoff games. They don't have to play a lot on the road because they do so well in the regular season. They own their division despite some tough challenges. And maybe we should bring up Rex Ryan at some point or another, but likely we'll forget about it by the time we get into all these playoff games. But anyway, Bill Belichick back at it again. Um, Patriots go down early, 14-0. It's 21-14 at the half. Baltimore gets a quick score in the third quarter. They go up 28-14. The Patriots erase that deficit and end up going on to win 35-31. Before we get into the specifics, anything really stick out to you from the first game of the weekend between New England and Baltimore?
Yeah, I was actually really surprised how fast Baltimore came out of the gates. I expected it to be a fairly high-scoring game, but I wasn't expecting them to jump out to a 14-point lead right off the bat in the first quarter. So the fact that they did that was impressive, and it was just as we had talked about last week. I said, Joe Flacco, once he gets to the playoffs, he turns into Joe Montana, and once again, he just right out of the gates, he throws a couple of touchdowns, gets them in for a couple of touchdowns, and they're rolling. But you just can't count New England out no matter what. And Tom Brady's done it so many times, and he came back, and at the end, he pulled it out.
Yeah, and it's crazy that they're the first team in playoff history. And I don't know, you always have these conversations. Did the winning team win or did the losing team lose? And you're gonna see it stated that New England was the first team in playoff history to overcome two 14-point deficits. But at the same time, the Baltimore Ravens are the first ones to surrender to 14-point leads. What did you think? Do you think the Patriots just outplayed them, or did Baltimore give it away?
I think the Patriots just outplayed them. I mean, uh, it's not like New England has the Cleveland Browns offense, so where it takes a miracle for them to come back from that big of a deficit two times in a row. So, I mean, Tom Brady has been doing this for so long. He's definitely in the discussion to be probably one of the top five, if top 10 for sure, if not top five quarterbacks of all time. I saw actually a stat today saying this is his ninth championship game that they'll be going to next week, whereas Peyton Manning's had one and done nine times. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know right there.
One and done 9 times. That's crazy. And spoiler alert: Peyton Manning does not victorious this weekend. But one of the things that sticks out to me, it's hard for me because I continue to believe that to win a football game at any level, except for maybe arena football or perhaps the Canadian League, that you have to be able to run the football to win games. Patriots, what do they get? They gain seven net yards rushing on Saturday, and
That is amazing.
not that they blew them out, but they they didn't back into this victory. They certainly earned the victory, and it was it was Tom Brady, it was Rob Gronkowski, but it was also what they had going on cerebrally between Josh McDaniels and, let's face it, probably Bill Belichick. Um, Setting up John Harbaugh, and it's always fun to see a Harbaugh frustrated after the game, but. Um, there was a play where Shane Vereen reports as an ineligible receiver because he was covered up on the line. He reported as ineligible basically as the Patriots were breaking the huddle. And I talked about this a little bit on my Sunday morning show, but you know, do you think that this is a loophole that's going to be closed with that method, with playing that quickly within the boundaries of the rule books, but not exactly within the spirit of the rules?
Well, I don't know if it's something that'll get changed or not. I mean, who's exploited it before? So, I mean, I guess in that, if you look at it that way, it could be something they look at. But it's not like the referees didn't call out this situation. So, I mean, the Ravens had a chance to acknowledge it. They just didn't do it, and then they wanted to cry about it afterwards.
So sour grapes or spilled milk in
Yeah,
this case for our purple friends in Baltimore.
absolutely.
All right. And how about the trick play with the former Kent State quarterback Julian Edelman on the double pass that just beat everyone?
Yeah, that I mean that was great. I mean, obviously Edelman was a quarterback when he was at Kent State, so he has the arm. I guess the most shocking thing about it to me is I didn't realize it's the first pass he's ever thrown in the NFL, and it goes for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think that Josh Cribbs, another former Kent State quarterback, you got to figure the Cleveland factor, but I think that his first pass was actually intercepted. So it's not always a given that these college quarterbacks are still throwers when if they switch positions in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that somebody said that was his spiral was actually nicer than Brady's.
All right, and you mentioned I don't know if we mentioned Gronkowski or not, but is he a player that is the difference between the Patriots being a run-of-the-mill playoff team and possibly being world champions?
Definitely. I mean, there is only so many tight ends in the game that you can say that about. I mean, Jimmy Graham comes to mind, Gronkowski, and used to be Antonio Gates, but I wouldn't even say that about him anymore, or Tony Gonzalez. But between those two right now, they're probably the two biggest game-changing tight ends out there.
Now, I've told anyone that'll listen to me about the Ravens, and everybody that's stuck on the 2000 Ravens and all the great defensive coordinators, not to take anything away from Dean Pease, but that this Baltimore Ravens team, including that Super Bowl winning team a couple of years ago, they've really shifted the way that they do things. They're not they're not a defense that has an offense good enough not to lose. Now they're a juggernaut on offense with a defense that's good enough not to lose, but the Patriots shut them down, and you know, the casual fan probably couldn't name three players on the defensive side of the ball for New England. So how does New England continue to, and 31 points isn't exactly a shutdown, but
No.
how does New England continue to outscore their opponent, despite the fact that they don't have the big names on defense like a lot of these other playoff teams do?
Well, I mean, the only name I think anybody's really going to recognize is Darrell Revis, obviously. So, but Bill Belichick. I mean, if you look at history, it's always his teams that throw up these schemes that somehow manage to pull out these games when they just don't have the talent that anybody expects them to. So I hate to say it, but you got to give the credit to Belichick, I think, in that regard.
Okay, overall, this game, Patriots pulling out the narrow victory. Any level of surprise on your part? Did you think that Baltimore might pull off the upset?
Oh, I thought it was definitely possible. They were fairly even matched teams, I would say. It was good. I figured it would come down to the quarterback play, is what it would amount to. And really, they both played pretty evenly. It was just at the end, Brady made the play to clinch it, whereas Flacco couldn't.
Yeah, and Flacco threw a couple of interceptions, showing himself, proving himself to be mortal even when the postseason rolls around for the first time in a while. I don't know when the last time Baltimore lost a playoff game was. So kudos to New England Patriots. Let's get into our Saturday night game before we get tackle the Sunday action. Carolina now 8-1 going into the game with Seattle actually plays the Seahawks pretty evenly for about a half of football. And I don't know if it was just, if it was rope a dope on the part of Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn in that Seattle defense, that they did get the interceptions. It was the usual suspects. It was Cam Chancellor. It was Richard Sherman. But Carolina gave Seattle a little bit more of a game, at least for about 2.5 quarters, than a lot of us would have expected. I actually predicted 31-3 in this game, and Seattle did their part by putting up the 31, but they didn't do their part on the defensive side of the ball by keeping Carolina out of the end zone. A little bit of a surprise considering how juggernaut the Seattle Seahawks defense can be, but um, did you see any momentum from Carolina? Because I've just believed them throughout their 5 or 6 game winning streak, whatever it was, to be very fraudulent and to take advantage of playing teams that weren't very good. They played a good game with Seattle back in Charlotte a million years ago. I think it was September, but. Um, were you surprised that Seattle was able to give them enough of a game, and were you fully expecting Seattle's defense to prevail in the end?
Uh, to the second part of that question, yes, I was expecting Seattle's defense to prevail in the end. In all honesty, the reason that Carolina ended up getting to this point is because their defense has been so great, and you know, as a lot of those things happen, that the defense eventually is going to have a hiccup, and they did in this game. I mean, Carolina's defense had been holding everybody down, and that's considering they were 3-8-1 to win these games and get to the second round. It's pretty amazing. I mean, really, they nobody expected them to be here in the first place 4 weeks ago, and the fact that they won their first round game and came. I mean, some of that was happenstance with the fact that Arizona had lost their first two-string quarterbacks, so I mean that played into it as well. But the defense had been playing really well for them, and in this game, they fought, but they were just overmatched by Seattle's offense. And I was actually more impressed with Carolina's offense in this game because they really hadn't been doing a whole lot. It had been more the defense just putting them in great position to score points, whereas this game, they actually had to go out there and earn those points, and they did it. So I give them credit for sticking with Seattle for the first half of the game, but in the end, I wasn't surprised by the result.
Yeah, I think that they could stand to add a little depth at the receiver position to help Cam Newton out.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Philly Brown can be a weapon offensively, but he can't be your number two to Kelvin Benjamin. I mean, you're playing two rookies out there. You're playing the tight end Olsen, who's a non-factor, and frankly, you run the ball, whether it's with Newton, Stewart, and D'Angelo Williams is back on the field. Not nearly as effective as Stewart was against the Arizona Cardinals, but I think he still had 70 yards on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty much an accomplishment against Seattle. So, one last thing on Seattle before we move into today's action. Is this team as good, better, or worse than the World Championship team from a year ago, or is the jury still out?
I would say the jury's still out. I think the defense took a step back this year early on. Now, lately, they've really come on and they're really hot right now. So it could just be a matter of they were kind of coasting earlier in the year and they're getting back to where they were at the end of last season when they won the Super Bowl. So, um, you know what they say about momentum. So at this point, they've got the momentum all in their favor going into next week.
All right, and let me give a little bit of credit to Russell Wilson, who picked up the offense on a day that Marshawn Lynch just didn't have it. So, there's a reason that they were able to pull away, and it was because the game was even. And when Carolina was scoring early, they were equalizers, and they weren't momentum shifts. So that was a big deal. Russell Wilson. You know, he's still got it a year later. One of the things I was surprised about with him is that he has enormous hands for as tall as he is. So I think that kind of offsets the height issue a little bit because usually you'd turn with a 5'11" guy, you have 5'11" guy hands, and he's got the hands of Andre the Giant there. So it is what it is. Let's move into Sunday, a game that Fox really inappropriate, deemed as the Ice Bowl 2.
Yeah,
And it was 25 degrees, which is,
which is a heat wave in Green Bay this time of year.
I mean, it's absolutely frigid for me and probably for you up in
Yeah.
Northern California. But 25 degrees is far from the days of the frozen tundra that we used to, that we used to watch NFL films with
Yep.
tables narrating and everything else. So, but I think the big story, at least in the first half of this game, was Aaron Rodgers' calf. He hadn't played since Week 17 when he came back from the calf injury. Um, he looked shaky early. Actually, both quarterbacks looked like they had problems with their knees. There was a play where Romo was taken down, and he landed right on top of I want to say it was Micah Hyde's shoe. And I just thought it was a bruise at first. He always hobbled going down the field, but this was a game that the Cowboys had a lot of opportunities to kind of pull away, and they just gave it away. Whether it was um, when there was a third down play that they were mistakenly given a first down
Hmm.
and then called timeout, gave the
Yep, and they lost it. Yeah, yeah.
I have a theory about that. I think the TV overplayed that one a little bit because I think if they rush up to the line and try to run a first down play, that it still gets stopped because
I agree.
we were inside the 2 minute warning at that point, so it could have been stopped at any time. I don't think that you can really beat an official replay because what's the harm in reviewing anything that's close, especially when it's coming from the booth. Now, if you're going to beat a coach throwing the red flag out there, that's one thing, but official reviews, I think, are going to happen regardless.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be about another play we'll talk about here in a little bit, but I'd say the whole thing is karma after last week's game at Detroit.
Okay. Okay. So, both teams showed an ability to run the ball, and then the defense is tightened up. Dallas's defense, I believed, was the only team in the NFC that could beat Seattle. But if they couldn't beat the Green Bay Packers with a one-legged Aaron Rodgers, I'm not sure what Dallas could have done, and it's kind of a moot point. But we had what was it, 26-20? Was it 26-21 when on the fourth down play at the end of the game with about 4 minutes left when Romo, when Des
Yep.
Bryant goes up, makes a pretty good catch. Takes a couple of strides. I don't know that you call them football moves necessarily, but he took a couple of steps towards the end zone, landed just short of the goal line, and the ball it hits the ground, pops up, lands back in his arms in the end zone. He was initially ruled down at the 1, and then we get a challenge from Mike McCarthy. Shockingly, the first challenge that he's won all season, and it's and the play is reversed because he didn't control the ball going to the ground. A little bit like the Calvin Johnson touchdown in Week 1 a couple years ago at Soldier
Hmm.
Field, where there was pretty much no question except for technicality. From the way that I understand the rule book, you have to control the ball all the way to the ground. And I think that the interpretation of the rule book in this case, that when it going against Dallas, it was correct. But I think that the spirit of the rule, this is an absolute violation of it, just like the Calvin Johnson play was. What are your thoughts on the play at the end of the game that ultimately gave Green Bay the ball back and gave them a berth in the NFC Championship game?
Yeah, like I said before, I think it's really karma from last week. I mean, the NFL admitted flat out last week that even though there wasn't pass interference or any penalty called when they picked up that flag against Dallas in the Detroit game, that it should have been at least holding. Whereas this one, they originally got the reception, but when McCarthy threw the challenge flag, they review it and they say, based on the rule, this is an incomplete pass. I think it could have gone either way. I would say Calvin Johnson's was probably even a little bit more blatantly obvious than this one, even though that one it was probably a little bit more controversial at the time. But based on the way the rule is out there, they called it as it was. So, like I said, I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to this was a karma.
Okay, and here's another case where it might have been karma, it might have just been a bad call, or I might just be completely insane. But the second quarter pass to Randall Cobb, which set up the field goal right before the half,
Mhm.
the nose of the ball from the end zone angle, the nose of the ball clearly hits the ground. His arms are underneath it underneath the ball to an extent. And of course, we're audio only tonight. And I'm making like arm motions as if you could see me, but Al Michaels continually refers to it, and he was calling the Baltimore New England game on Saturday, but he refers to it as the Bert Emanuel rule going back to the 2000 NFC playoffs. But this is a ball that hit the ground. They go to Mike Pereira in the booth. Mike Pereira agrees with me, and that doesn't always happen. And he's got more credentials than I do, quite obviously. But they say it should be overturned. I think it happens all the time. These officiating experts are really showing up their former colleagues because, or they're just exposing their own
Well,
perhaps
except
incompetence
with the exception of Mike Carey, who was wrong 75% of the time.
this season. Was it? Did it seem that bad?
Oh yeah, it did.
And I think it's really inconsistent with Pereira. I mean, I'd rather just hear Joe Buck and Troy Aikman argue about it than bring in a guy that's an expert and then have the call go the other way because there's no consistency with it.
No.
I just, replay seems like it works about 70% of the time, maybe, and maybe that's enough. But sometimes it really just seems like an exercise in futility. What are your thoughts on replay as a whole?
I like it for the plays that it overturns that it should. I mean, there's a lot of questionable calls that still come out of replay that can be infuriating. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess you just have to take the good with the bad. Whereas you're going to get some of the ones that you wouldn't normally get that are going to help you, and unfortunately, sometimes they're just you got to shake your head and when they call something and it looks obvious the other way. So it, it's better. It's better than not having it, I guess, is where I'm getting at.
All right, and let's visit the one-legged Aaron Rodgers issue really quickly. He looked like he was standing on one leg in the first half. Then he
Hmm.
seemed like it didn't bother him. Do you think he just got his sea legs under him, or do you think there were cortisone shots and other shenanigans going on in the bowels of Lambeau Field at halftime?
Uh, well, if this was 5 years ago, I'd say they probably shot him up with something, but I don't think they're doing that anymore. So I'm sure they did some sort of treatment at halftime that helped with it, whether it was heat or massage or something. Because you're right, he looked entirely different in the second half than he did in the first half. In the first half, he was shaky at best. I thought they were very lucky to be as close as they were at that point going into halftime. But in the second half, he looked like the Aaron Rodgers you were used to expect to see. I mean, minus the scrambling.
And he did extend plays. He just extended them
Yep.
in different ways. And I thought the protection was great by the Green Bay line, especially after the little skirmish between
Yeah.
T.J. Lang and Nick Hayden. I think that fired up Green Bay's offensive line, and
Hmm.
it cost Green Bay at the time, but
Hmm.
the Cowboys weren't in Aaron Rodgers' back pocket after that play. So I thought that was a momentum swing that looked bad for Green Bay at the time, but maybe played to their benefit later on. Speaking of later on, uh,
Real quick before you head off of that one, Jeff, there was something that did bother me about the Green Bay on Green Bay's side, though, as I don't know if you noticed it or not, but as Green Bay was going late in the game, I didn't see Eddie Lacy in there. He had rushed 19 times for 101 yards and was really getting yards at will. And I'm like, why are they not putting him in there at the end? They didn't need to throw. So it just didn't make any sense to me with the play calling at the end that he wasn't in there. I didn't hear about any injuries or anything, so
I
I
neither
was a
did
little
I.
bit surprised about that.
Yeah, and there was they basically put in a Randall Cobb running back off the
Yeah,
bench for the end of
yeah.
the game. That was kind of strange. I think it just gave them some versatility, and if Randall Cobb can run the ball between the tackles, he's a Percy Harvin type of weapon. And
Sure.
it's not like he's any secret to anyone. He's been a dynamic player since he came into the league. But if he can run the ball between the tackles and be that perimeter threat that he is to complement Jordy Nelson, the Packers are only going to get better over time, provided that number 12 stays healthy. So, speaking of number 12, actually, let's talk about Andrew Luck going and the first overall pick of the Indianapolis Colts going to play a former first overall pick of the Indianapolis Colts in Denver. Now, this is a game that I actually predicted that the Broncos would win about 41-28 because the Colts scored a lot of points, but They don't tend to do it when it matters. Their defense didn't look overly impressive against Cincinnati, and their running game consists of Boom Herron and Zerlon Tipton.
Yes,
Um,
how that Browns trade, even though it hasn't worked out for them with Trent Richardson, he was inactive today. That tells you everything you need to know about Trent Richardson at this point.
and what are we, 15 months removed from Jim Irsay making a big deal about trading a first round pick for the services of Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, hey, let me go on a little Browns tangent here. I was thinking about this earlier today. Especially watching Eddie Lacy. Ingram's been good. I have every reason to believe that Derrick Henry and T.J. Yeldon are going to be good players in the NFL. And you're going to have this list of great Alabama running backs, and then their NFL fate. And the only guy that's not going to fall on that NFL list is the guy that the Browns took with the third overall pick. Kind of reminds me of back in the early 2000s when Butch Davis and
Pete Garcia.
well, I'm thinking about all the Miami guys, between Clinton Portis, Frank
Oh,
Gore, Willis McGahee. The Browns end up with James Johnson, and he's the
okay.
one guy that doesn't stick in the NFL.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, that's my little Browns tangent. Um, so Indianapolis, it's two things that really stuck out. Obviously, the play of Andrew Luck was fabulous, and he's everything that he's written up to be. But the fact that they're able to run the ball and keep defenses honest to Andrew Luck, and T.Y. Hilton played a better game. They found the guy, I call him not Jacob Tammy because Jacob Tammy's for Denver, but Doyle wear number 84, Kobe Fleener, Dwayne Allen. They just got it done. Even Hakeem Nicks is a little bit, seems to be a little bit reborn there in Indianapolis. It
hmm
just seemed like they had everything going. But what really stuck out to me was a combination of the perhaps poor play of Peyton Manning combined with the fact that there were no yards after catch to be had. Even if Manning could throw his guys open, they weren't running after the catch, and that's what makes guys like Julius Thomas, Demarius Thomas. Who am I
Emmanuel
forgetting?
Sanders
Emmanuel Sanders especially, and
and Walker.
and Welker was almost a non-factor. I thought that C.J. Anderson ran the ball well. I just
Yep.
didn't think that Adam Gase, who's this for the second year in a row, this incredible head coaching candidate, that they didn't use C.J. Anderson more, especially on a day when Manning didn't have it. So. The final score ends up being what 20 Colts 24, Broncos 13 in perhaps Peyton Manning's swan song to the NFL.
It's possible. I mean, we talked about it previously, but Peyton Manning just hasn't looked like Peyton Manning for pretty much the second half of the season, and today was just. I thought I was seeing one of the Browns quarterbacks out there as inaccurate as those passes were today. I mean, every time he overthrew Thomas down the sideline or Sanders down the sideline, I'm flashing back to Brian Hoyer like with Josh Gordon. So it's sad to see because Peyton Manning's been such an amazing quarterback, and he's always been one of those quarterbacks could thread the needle with his passes, and they were just all over the place today. I mean, he barely completed 50% of his passes in this game, which is very un-Peyton Manning-like. So I know it's going to be one of those big topics. Is he going to be back? Is he going to end it like this? Blah, blah, blah. But he definitely does not look like the Peyton Manning we're all used to seeing.
All right, I want to certainly give the Colts credit for winning this game, and we'll get to them in just a second. But other than Manning, what's the future of the Denver Broncos? Do you see them dumping John Fox? Do you see Del Rio and Gase moving on? And frankly, the answer at quarterback, if it's Brock Osweiler, that's a little bit scary, especially if you're a Denver fan that's in it for more than just Peyton Manning's years.
Absolutely. I mean, you go from John Elway to nothing for a long time to Peyton Manning. So, and then you could be going to nothing for another long time. So there could be a lot of changes there. I mean, last year they at least made it to the Super Bowl, even though they got embarrassed by Seattle in the Super Bowl. This, as we said before, this was Manning's ninth one and done in the playoffs, and though as amazing as he's been over the years and during the regular season, he is definitely, as we've said, in that top five quarterback discussion. The fact that he had 9 one and dones in the playoffs, that's amazing. When I saw that today, so they could be in for a lot of changes. I can't see firing Fox just because they lost in this game. I mean, they made it to the playoffs again, and we talked about this previously. They have really changed their dynamic, the way they played on offense the last half of the season. They went to a much more running team and a lot less passing. So maybe if Manning says he's going to be back next year and he heals and he comes back strong next year, but he's not getting any younger either. So there could be a lot of changes there. I don't know if they should at this point yet.
Can the Colts win in Foxborough?
Yes, they can. I think it'll be difficult. I mean, we talked about before what Belichick's done to quarterbacks over the year with his defenses, even with no names. So I think it'll be a great game. It's going to come down to one of the all-time best to one of the biggest up-and-comers. It's going to come down to the quarterback play again. Is Tom Brady going to make the play to win it, or is Andrew Luck going to make the play to win it? So it could be another high-scoring affair like we saw with this week with Baltimore and New England, or it could be, it depends on weather too. It could all be a play. I mean, that is the other thing that's going to be at New England's advantage is the Colts are a dome team, and they're going to have to play in cold weather. I mean, it wasn't nearly as bad today in Denver as the Colts are going to be facing in New England next week, I'm sure.
Okay, same question on the NFC side of the equation. Can the Packers go into False Start Field and beat the 11 Seahawks on the field plus the 12th man?
With Aaron Rodgers on one leg, it's going to be difficult. I mean, it would have been difficult if he had two healthy legs, but if he plays like he did in the first half, I don't see it happening. If he plays like he did in the second half, it's possible. I'm going to bet Seattle's probably at least a 3 to 5 point favorite minimum going into the game, and I would probably go with that. But I don't rule Aaron Rodgers out on anything, so I think it'll be a good game, but I expect Seattle to win.
Okay, plug time, Chris. Let's get your Twitter handle and anything else you're doing on for More Than a Fan or anything.
So my Twitter handle is at CGRN731. I actually don't have anything going on for a couple weeks, so nothing to plug this week.
All right, I'm Jeff Rich at by Jeff Rich on Twitter. You can catch us here every Sunday night that there's playoffs. We got to decide what we're gonna do Pro Bowl week, but we can do that offline, Chris.
Yep.
Yeah, catch us here at More Than a Fan, 8:15 Eastern Time every Sunday that there's football. And catch my Sunday morning show on the Sports Byline Network from 11 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. And look for me on Twitter at by Jeff Rich. That's going to do it for us tonight. Have a great week, everyone. Good night.